Welcome into another episode of Locked On Phillies. In today's episode, there's some interesting news that a all-star outfielder could be making a free agency decision soon. And it's one that could involve the Philadelphia Phillies. We'll discuss a new outfield option. We're also going to talk about what Taijaun Walker had to say, as pitchers and catchers reported, about some tweets he liked after the 2023 offseason and where his relationship is at with manager Rob Thomson. And for our opening day countdown, we reach a very special number in baseball, number 42. We'll break it all down on today's episode of Locked On Phillies.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm Connor Thomas, your host. Thank you so much for checking us out. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Please make sure you're rating, reviewing, subscribing to the YouTube. All that stuff really helps us out. Get you new notifications when new episodes are posted. Takes like 2 seconds, so I appreciate all of that. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Best way to buy tickets for games that you want to go see. Game Time. Check them out. A lot of good stuff going on right now. NBA's rolling, NHL's rolling, and the Philadelphia Phillies have reported to spring training. They have a couple spots still open when it comes to their spring training because, as Rob Thomson talked about yesterday, and you can watch my full breakdown or listen to my full breakdown of his comments in our latest episode prior to today, you need to have more room in case you add guys. Dudes kind of fall out of the sky this time of year and say, okay, I'm going to settle and sign in Philadelphia. And you end up with someone you weren't expecting. And there's some rumors that the Philadelphia Phillies could do just that because there's an all-star outfielder, utility player that could be making his decision soon. It sounds like Whit Merrifield is going to make a decision relatively soon as far as where he wants to go in free agency. There have been like 4 or 5 teams in the conversation for Merrifield, who, was an all-star last year with the Toronto Blue Jays. His slash line, 272, 318, 382. He had 11 homers, 67 RBIs, played in 145 games. Guy was durable. Guy was productive. Guy was an all-star. That's a pretty good option, and he played outfield and infield. He's a utility guy. The Philadelphia Phillies are one of the teams that seem to be interested in Whit Merrifield, but there's no guarantee that they're the team that's going to end up with him, right? We're not sure how in the mix they are. We just know that Whit Merrifield is expected to come to a decision soon, and the Philadelphia Phillies are being mentioned along with that. Sorry, that was my chair just almost breaking. Anyway, here's the issue with Whit Merrifield, right? And I'm very interested to see where the fan base is at with this one, so you can let me know in the comments. But the biggest problem with Whit Merrifield is he's 35 years of age, right? Yes, he was an all-star this past year, but at 35 years old, utility guy, it's a really tough cross-section. What the Phillies are looking for is they're looking for someone who could play coming off the bench so that Brandon Marsh and Yohan Rojas and Nick Castellanos are their starting outfielders, and this person coming off the bench is just he's an upgrade over Jay Cave and Christian Pache, right? That's all that player has to be. Now, Whit Merrifield's an all-star. So your first thought is, well, if I'm an all-star from the previous year and I'm in free agency, I want to go somewhere where I'm guaranteed I'm starting in the outfield. You're going to tell me, an all-star, I'm coming off the bench? Oh, okay, dude. You got a guy that couldn't hit in the postseason in Yohan Rojas. You got a guy you don't trust against lefties in Brandon Marsh, and you're going to tell me I'm not going to play in the outfield over them? And I would get why Whit Merrifield would feel that way, right? I'm not saying he's saying that. I'm just saying, like, if I was him, that's probably what I'd be saying. And the other argument, though, is, yeah, but dude, you're 35 years old. Sure, you were great last year, but these guys are young and they're the future of the organization. So if you want to come here, you can come here, but I can't guarantee you much playing time. And we're going to win, and you're going to be a part of it. And we could have insanely good depth if we had an all-star to come off the bench. Like, that would be the Phillies argument. And I don't know how they're going to fall on that or if they've even gotten that far into it. But that would be the back and forth that I'd imagine them having. So as fans, we have to decide this. Would you rather have a 35-year-old all-star from last year in Whit Merrifield, that's a utility guy that can play multiple places, but mainly an outfielder, take over an outfield position over Johan Rojas or Brandon Marsh? Would you rather have a veteran that's a little bit older, but proven, and you know he's going to be productive, or would you rather take a chance with the kid or the kids in Marsh and Rojas's case and decide whether or not those guys are the future of your outfield in Philadelphia? Like, it's a tough decision, right? It's not an easy, well, no doubt Whit Merrifield is starting and you don't think twice about it. Like, he's not Mike Trout. So for me, I've staunchly been a supporter of playing Johan Rojas and playing Brandon Marsh every day in the outfield. Like, frankly, it's just all that makes sense to me. Unless you can bring in someone like and I've already told you how I feel about Cody Bellinger. I don't think with his inconsistencies over the past couple of seasons that he's going to be the right option for the Philadelphia Phillies to spend a lot of money on. But like, unless you bring in a player of that caliber or that was that type of player that he was last year, there's no reason to start a 35-year-old aging veteran over Rojas and Marsh. Like, you don't need that much offensively. You don't need that much defensively. Your team is good enough with those guys. So if you can be good enough while developing young players, I think you have to do that. This is not just, well, we're playing for 2024. No, the Philadelphia Phillies they're not the Sixers, right? The Sixers have an issue where it's just like every year feels like an all-in year. I don't know if you know this, but Bryce Harper's contract still has a couple years on it. Trey Turner's contract still has a couple years on it. Aaron Nola's new contract has a couple years on it. The championship contention window for this team is much bigger than 1 year. It's much bigger than 3 years. It's much bigger than 5 years. This team, as long as Bryce Harper and Trey Turner are here, are going to be in the conversation. They just are. And the pitching staff is solid. The hope is they re-sign Wheeler. If you want to know how close Wheeler and the Phillies are to an extension, you can listen to yesterday's episode where I broke a little bit of that down, as well as Zach Wheeler talked about it when pitchers and catchers reported. But my point is, you need to have guys that grow through this system and not just in the minors. It's not just bring guys up, show their talent at the major league level, trade them for other guys, or move them for free agents you're signing. Eventually, a Brandon Marsh is going to have to work in the outfield. Eventually, and I know he was someone you traded for, but you get what I mean. Eventually, a Johan Rojas is going to have to work in the outfield. You can't just bring in mercenary free agents forever. That's how you go insanely high on the luxury tax. That's how you get into a tougher spot when it comes to moving and developing players because they don't get a chance to play at the major league level. And that's when you get into a spot where you have to fix more and more every year when these contracts start coming up. It's much easier when you have a guy pre-arbitration or arbitration eligible, not hitting free agency for like 6 years, and you got them on a cheap deal and they're a player out there. Hint, look at what the Atlanta Braves are doing. And I know they're signing some of those guys early, but like, that's the thing. That's how you do it. That's how you become a perennial 100 win the division team. I know their playoff success hasn't been great, but like, that's how you build a great organization, is by doing it that way. And bringing in a player like Whit Merrifield at 35 years of age, very productive, very versatile, but probably wants a lot of time playing in the outfield, isn't exactly how you develop those guys. It just doesn't seem to gel with what the Philadelphia Phillies are doing. And I'll tell you what, the Philadelphia Phillies, when everything's all said and done, wherever they end up this season, they're not going to be a Whit Merrifield away from the World Series. They're just not. It's not a realistic way to view this season. They're either going to be good enough or they're going to fall short. And it won't be the difference of one utility outfield infielder. Like, it's just not how this season's going to play out. I promise you. They're going to be in the postseason. They're going to either have issues like they did last year that cost them, or they're going to remedy those issues and win it. But I think Whit Merrifield makes them better. I don't think it's a like over the top, you have to make this move type of thing. And that's the only type of move I would make to usurp Johan Rojas or Brandon Marsh out there in the outfield. So that's how I feel about those rumors. But you can let me know. Would you bring in the older but proven all-star, but probably wants playing time over some of your everyday players that you wanted to see, guy in Whit Merrifield? Or would you stick with the outfield as is? And ultimately, you may choose somewhere else. So this is just a fun discussion based on the hypothetical, but that's what we're doing here. It's the offseason. So a fun conversation there as far as that's concerned. Coming up next, this is not a hypothetical. This happened, folks, and this is something the Philadelphia Phillies have to deal with. But Taijaun Walker liked some tweets after the postseason last year, a postseason in which he did not appear. And some of the tweets were questioning Rob Thomson and the way the Phillies handled him in the postseason. What's the relationship there? Well, Taijaun Walker talked about it with Alex Coffey of the Inquirer. Nice article there in the Inquirer that you can go ahead and check out. And I'm going to share my thoughts from it coming up as we continue today's episode of Locked On Phillies. First, though, I want to tell you about my friends over at Game Time, all right? There are plenty of times where you're sitting around and you're like, man, we should have gone to that game. It's fourth quarter. The teams are neck and neck. Wouldn't it be great to be in the seats for that? Like, I think about it all the time. And there's a great way to make snap decisions on buying tickets. Not break the bank, actually get a really good deal. You got to check out Game Time because you shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to the next big event. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. They got killer last-minute deals like I was just talking about. All-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. I mean, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. They got a bunch of great stuff. You can see your view from your seats. They'll show you the total. You won't have to worry about like fees getting crazy tacked on at the end. It's quick and easy to buy tickets. They got all kinds of deals, flash deals, zone deals where you pick your section and Game Time picks the seats for big savings. And the Game Time guarantee means you're going to get 110% of the difference if you find tickets in the same section and row for less. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So Taijaun Walker had a very interesting end to his 2023 season. The Phillies in general had a very interesting end with the way the NLCS went against the Arizona Diamondbacks. But Walker specifically was in a weird spot because there was a game in there where Christopher Sanchez started through minimal innings, then was relieved, and it was turned into a bullpen game, a game that was changing the course of the series at the time we knew. And now as we look back in hindsight, it really changed the course of that series. And meanwhile, Taijaun Walker sitting on the bench, sitting on his hands, not throwing. A guy who had 15 wins in the regular season. A guy that's been an all-star before. Like a guy that has a proven track record of just a decade's worth of Major League Baseball pitched. And he was just sitting there. And then after the season, he went on Twitter and he liked a couple tweets. Now, you can see what people like on Twitter. So people noticed when Taijaun Walker was liking tweets about it's your manager's fault, stuff like that. Why didn't they use you? That's ridiculous. The organization's stupid for not using you. Things of that nature. Like, people notice when you do that, and that can become contentious in a locker room. So what happened with Taijaun Walker? Well, Rob Thomson and Dave Dombrowski in their exit interviews, so months ago after the 2023 season, said everything's fine. Like they get it and everything's worked out. But Taijaun Walker got his chance to say his part yesterday ahead of, or I guess while pitchers and catchers reported to spring training. And he echoed the sentiment. He said, everything's good, man. I got no issue with them. Love Topper. Like, good with the organization. I'm excited to come back and work. And, so it sounds like everything is good between them. He said that people get emotional. Like, it happens to everybody. We're human. There are emotions after a loss. He talked about what it feels like to go back and watch the postseason highlights, even if he didn't play, and like how exciting it was to be in the postseason and how that emotion and adrenaline can get to you. So listen, I get it. If I was in Taijaun Walker's spot, would I be liking tweets about my manager? Probably not. But would I be fuming inside saying, why in the world did they not give me the ball? Absolutely. I mean, they're competitors. These guys don't get there by being non-competitive. Like, you know how Major League athletes are. They want the ball, every single one of them, from Junior Marte all the way up to Zach Wheeler. Every single one of them thinks that they should have the ball, and when they don't get it and seem that they earned it, well, that bothers them. So I get where Taijaun Walker's coming from. I'm also glad there's no beef there. I didn't expect there to be. This is a really strong locker room, a really great manager who seems to have an awesome relationship with his players and a franchise and organization that's frankly top class. So I'm not worried about it at all. Now, what does Walker need to do so that he doesn't put himself in this situation again in the future? He could delete the Twitter app, but I'm more talking about what he can do on the field. And he talked a little bit about that as well. So I found this really interesting in the article. Great work, again, by Alex Coffey, by the way, in the Philadelphia Inquirer. So you can go ahead and check out this write-up and many more that she does on the Philadelphia Phillies. But Walker talked about the weight that he pitches at. And he said, I forgot how big he was for a second because it said like 255, 260 was the weight he usually pitched at prior to coming to Philadelphia. And I'm like, Jesus, really? And I remember the guy's like 6 billion feet tall. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. But he was down to like 230 this past year, 235. So he was as light as he's ever been when he pitched. And he brought up his velocity issues, or inconsistencies rather, because there were some times where he looked like he was throwing hard, sometimes where he looked like he lost zip. And he was like, I'm wondering if part of it was because I was pitching at a lighter weight. He found a bit of a middle ground. He's going to be like 245, 250 this year. So put on some weight, put on some muscle in the offseason. He's like, I think that's going to help me with the velocity. We'll see. It's crazy, all the things that we don't think about, right? You wonder as a fan, you're like, it can't be that easy. It can't be that simple. Like, he had rough outings because he was 10 pounds lighter, but baseball is a sport of, when they say football is a game of inches, baseball is a game of millimeters. Just a small tenth of a degree of difference is a home run to a line drive, to a ground ball, to a strikeout. Like, it's crazy the margins that affect this game, especially over 162 games. And weight can make a difference. So if Taijuan Walker thinks that's going to put him in better position, then I'm all for it. I'd love to see him have a better year. And I'll tell you what, I don't even think he had that bad of a year back in 2023. Like, 15 wins doesn't happen by accident. I'm higher on Taijuan Walker than I think most people are. I don't think he's an all-star this year, but I think he's a good, solid fourth or fifth option in the rotation. And I think there's very few rotations that have better than Taijuan Walker at their fourth or fifth spot. We'll see who those are. I mean, Atlanta comes to mind. Los Angeles comes to mind. But like, looking at it, you say, okay, well, this is a pretty good spot to have Taijuan Walker, a guy who's proven and seems to be motivated to come back. And he said he wants to leave no reason for the Philadelphia Phillies to sit him again in the postseason. Like, he wants to leave no doubt that he deserves to be out there this time around. We know the Phillies are going to be a postseason team. Like, we know it. Something catastrophic would have to happen for them to not be. So when they get to that point, Taijuan Walker is motivated by not pitching this past year to say, yo, I want to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that I can do it this year and go out there and be part of the postseason success of this team. I mean, as much as, like, you love going to Citizens Bank Park, right? Could you imagine what it would be like if you grew up, played baseball, made it professionally, made the team, got to be in that environment, and then you didn't play? Like, that would suck. And that's tough for Taijuan Walker. Like, you got to empathize with what the guy is going through, or what he went through last year when they didn't pitch him and the team got knocked out. So I hope it's a motivating year for Taijuan Walker. I hope he has a great year at the back end of the rotation. And I'm glad to hear that him and Rob Thomson, the organization, are cool and they're all on the same page. So more good news out of Philadelphia Phillies spring training as pitchers and catchers continue to get settled in. Sounds like a team that's motivated and very focused on winning. So I feel good about that. Coming up, they better continue their focus for 42 days, because that's how many days we have until opening day. And we'll get to go through our number 42 best Philadelphia Philly in history. Who wore number 42 and was the best player in this franchise's history? Well, we'll break it down next as we wrap up Locked On Phillies. First, I want to tell you about my friends over at FanDuel, okay? You can get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. You can bet on all your NBA favorite players and teams, right? I'm a Sixers guy. I like Tyrese Maxey. Yeah, I bet on them last night. Now, I didn't win that bet, but that's fine. I've been with FanDuel for a while, so I'm not even eligible for this. It's new users only. But if you're thinking about joining it, it's a great thing to do to just like look at a game and say, wow, I know what's going to happen here. Why don't I make some money on it? Listen to the ways you can bet on NBA games. You can do quick bets. You can do live same game parlays. So you see a player getting hot or you see the score going through the roof. You can say, okay, I'm going to bet the over and I'm going to bet Sixers money line. Perfect. They've got exclusive props that you can only find on FanDuel and all your old favorites, money line, spread, over, under, player props, all that great stuff. So just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, it's time for our jersey countdown. 42 is a very interesting one for obvious reasons, right? There was a very special number 42 in baseball history. In fact, they have a day for him now. I'm sure all of you have heard of one Jackie Robinson, who wore the number 42, and that's why people don't wear 42 anymore in baseball. So a lot smaller of a sample size to pick from here as far as Phillies that wore 42. You got to go like way back in the day. The last Philly to wear number 42 was Toby Borland from 1994 to 1996. No one since 96 has worn that jersey number. Now, they'll wear it on Jackie Robinson Day when everyone across baseball wears the number 42 to honor the legend that Jackie Robinson was. And frankly, I might just say that we're like, anytime we do a countdown like this, number 42 should be just Jackie Robinson's number, even though he didn't play for the Philadelphia Phillies. But there are some good players that played back in the day that wore 42. Probably the best, if we're going with a Philly-specific player, Greg Luzinski is probably the one. 1970 and 1971, he wore number 42. The Bull, I mean, he's a guy that was a big part of, like, back in the day, those teams. And if he wore 42, that puts him on the list. So I can't see anyone else on here simply because of the smaller sample size to put. And it's probably right that we just give it to Jackie Robinson as well, out of respect for the legend, but out of respect for the podcast too. Like, giving you the names. There's some other on here, like Ron Reed, Jim Nash wore it in 1972. Dave LaPointe in 1991 wore number 42. But Greg Luzinski back in the day is probably the one that you'd look and say, okay, that's the guy that that would deserve that for best Philly to ever wear 42. That's all for the opening day countdown today, and that's all for today's episode. Appreciate you checking us out. And please, again, make sure you're rating, reviewing, subscribing to the YouTube, all that great stuff. I really appreciate it. Again, thank you. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And tomorrow, Friday episode, we're going to have some stuff to break down as far as the first week of spring training, even though it's only been a couple of days. And we're going to continue the news on what could be happening in free agency. So stay tuned for that episode. Appreciate y'all checking in. I'll talk to you next time on the next episode of Locked On Phillies.